All nurses to the nurses station.
Cancer. It's a disease that infects and destroys the lives of so many across the globe. There are millions of new cases every year and hundreds of thousands of deaths. It affects all of us in one way or another. Throughout recent history, however, professionals at Winship Cancer Institute at Emory University in Atlanta have taken major strides in the fight against cancer with hopes of one day defeating the disease completely.
The Winship Cancer Institute was founded by a gift by Robert Winship Woodruff, so it's named after his family, and that was about 82 years ago. His grandmother had breast cancer, and they needed someplace local to treat her, and so he thought it was very important to build a cancer center here in Atlanta so people did not have to travel out of Georgia to get cancer care. But as it turns out, we also have people that come in from around the world, around the United States and from other countries to get their cancer care here. So it's definitely evolved over the years.
To better understand the impact of cancer on a person's life, I spoke with two people that know a great deal on the matter.
My diagnosis was multiple myeloma, and I was diagnosed in 2000.
My, relationship with cancer, or my experience with cancer, is that of my husband being diagnosed with cancer and living with cancer for about 18 months and then eventually passing away from the disease.
The first time I heard my diagnosis, it was confusing. I had had some indicators a couple years prior to that, but they didn't really explain exactly what they were.
He was diagnosed in March of 2013, end of the month. His diagnosis was synovial cell sarcoma. It's a very rare soft tissue cancer. He was old for the age group. It usually affects people in their 30s and under, but he was about 53 or 54. The diagnosis came kind of second. He had surgery. We thought he had some kind of lung issue that was just somewhat routine, and he went into surgery and it was there for a lot longer, and I was in the waiting room. I didn't bring anybody with me, so I was by myself, and then finally the surgeon came out and took me into a private room, which I didn't like, because it's kind of a signal that it was something more. And he told me that my husband had cancer, which was absolutely shocking because it was lung related. He never smoked or didn't have any personal habits or anything that would have made you ever think that he had cancer. The original doctor that we saw for the lung issue was affiliated with Emory, and so we stayed with Emory, and the surgeon that we were recommended to was down at the main campus at Emory, and who was really tops in his field, and so we just continued with Winship throughout the whole process.
The longest time I've actually been at Emory Hospital is approximately 2 weeks, and that was for a stem cell transplant. The process itself is similar really to a blood transfusion. They collected stem cells from my brother and put them into like an IV bag, and then the next day they put them into me, and that rejuvenated, I'll say, my immune system and made it better able to fight the myeloma.
My husband was treated at Winship from the surgery, which was one of the biggest surgeries they do perform on people. And so he had one lung removed, he had a rib removed, and he had most of his diaphragm removed, and they had to reconstruct his diaphragm. So it was a very involved, very, very big surgery. And he came out of it very well. He was healthy otherwise, and he was considered young. Although he was in his mid-50s, he was considered young. He actually walked out of the intensive care unit. The nurses at the nurses station said he was the only person they've ever seen walk out of intensive care to go to his regular room. When
I was diagnosed, you try and keep a positive, outlook on things, and at the time, my children were relatively young, so that was, important to me to be able to just interact with my children, and not have that be affected.
I had an 8-year-old son at the time, so I had to be there for him. Also, I work full-time, so it was actually a good thing. It was a very good thing. It gave me time to kind of focus on something else and keep my mind off of things.
I feel that the treatment I get at Emory is very good. They do a lot of clinical trials in terms of participating in the development of new drugs and programs.
Physicians at Winship have made great strides in not only the fight against myeloma, but cancers across the board.
My job is directly related to shepherding new drugs into the clinic for the treatment of cancer. We, as a program, perform a lot of trials that are very early in the testing of a drug. For example, what's commonly referred to as a first-in-human trial. So these are drugs and trials that have never been tested before in patients with cancer or anyone else. And so our job is to help do that safely and to try to define the right dose to carry on into subsequent phases of testing of the drug in clinical trials.
When I was first diagnosed, there was one medication, thalidomide, and the treatment was stem cell transplants. So basically, if those treatments didn't work for you, you were kind of out of luck. Now, there are several different drugs. I mean, I've progressed myself through probably about a half dozen different drugs, and there are still other drugs that are approved for treatment of myeloma. So, and Emory, participates in the development of that.
Locally, we enroll patients on trials that come from our metro Atlanta area. We're out in the community talking with individuals and groups and patient groups about the work we do to really end the cancer that we see on a daily basis. I'm involved with the American Society of Clinical Oncology, the biggest cancer organization, as are many of my fellow faculty members. Internationally, many of our faculty members as well have been on leading investigators on very large practice-changing clinical trials. And as a reminder, that's where new drugs come from. Every drug we use today in the clinical treatment of cancer came from a trial, and it was from someone who was brave enough and trusted us enough to go on to a trial.
We do a number of events throughout the year here at the Winship Cancer Institute to raise money. The Winship 5K is one of our largest events on campus with 3,500 participants each year. This year it'll raise about $800,000 for cancer research. We have a Winship Gala, we have a Winship fashion show, we have a second year event called Cars Under the Stars that takes place in November, and it's a car show here at Winship. All those events bring in probably close to $4 million for the Winship Cancer Institute each year.
I'm a pharmacist by training. I'm from Rome originally, Georgia, not Italy. And I came into this line of work because I'm a pharmacist. So my world is very much driven by drugs and ways that we can help people be better through drug therapy.
We have some truly amazing physicians and doctors here that are doing all kinds of research. That research is being done here in our backyard, which is amazing. To say that the money that we raise through different types of events actually stays here at Winship and funds research here at the Winship Cancer Institute.
To me, when I was thinking about my pathway in life in pharmacy school, it was clear to me that cancer was going to be an area where we were very likely to have bigger breakthroughs, and this was in 1994, than we had currently. And so it was an area where I saw a huge opportunity from a growth perspective. Cancer doesn't care who you are, where you're from, what your zip code is. So there's a lot of humanistic approach to it as well. The emotional levels can be hard. Certainly our staff and our nurses really understand that our purpose here is to treat the whole patient. They also know how to unplug when they need to, because we certainly all need to do that at various points. We have hard times, but we also have successes, and I think that's what keeps us going.
One thing I would say to somebody who had recently been diagnosed is I think it helps to have goals. One of my goals that I set back when I started the treatment was I wanted to run the Boston Marathon. So when I was diagnosed, I made it a goal that I would make sure that my health was maintained by exercising more, and that eventually I would work up to where I'd be able to run the Boston Marathon again, which I did do. And now I plan on running a marathon with my daughter Rebecca in just about a month.
And just for reference, how many marathons have you run since your diagnosis?
Since my diagnosis, I've run, I think, approximately about 25 marathons.
The treatment that Phil received at Winship has allowed him to maintain a healthy lifestyle and spend quality time with his family.
The one thing I want to say about the doctors and the nurses throughout the whole process is that they did an excellent job in the way they approach you and talk to you. And even though your diagnosis might be quite devastating, they still kept hope for us alive. And you really need that because it's such a difficult time to keep moving forward in life. And it really helped because they kept your hope alive, because sometimes long shots come in. We didn't have the outcome that we'd hoped and prayed for, but the work that they're doing at Emory, Winship, that's the future. I believe that someday they will win the fight.
Katie and her son have gone on to raise money in the Winship 5K to fight cancers similar to the one that left a hole in their lives. They raise money to fight cancer so others don't have to go through what they did. Cancer is an evil force that has been documented since 3000 BC. But with help from the Winship Cancer Institute, people around the world are finding cures for cancers of all different kinds. Let's come together. Let's win the fight.